I have chosen to analyze and comment on Janet Winterson's essay, Once Upon a Shop from 2010. I will start off with a short introduction to the text. Following that, I will analyze the style of writing in the text as well as the author's use of history. Furthermore, I will go into depth with the use of playful language and the value-laden words, as well as the argumentation and the forms of appeal. Lastly, I will put the essay into perspective by comparing it to our work with the theme Man and Nature from earlier this year. And finally, I will summarize with a conclusion. Planet Earth is not only our home, it's our only home, which is why we should take great care of it. However, since the first thoughts of capitalism entered Europe and the rest of the Western world during the industrialization, our climate has suffered greatly, to say the least. This topic is exactly what Janet Winterson deals with in her essay Once Upon a Shop, which is written in 2010 and published in the British newspaper The Observer. Winterson's essay is a crystal clear critique of capitalism and our liberal economy in today's modern world. She believes that we have become so focused on profit, money, and mass production that we have lost our human essence and our individuality along the way. This is why she is a strong believer in small shops with soul and heart and advocates for a greener and more sustainable world. If we look at the style of writing in the text, it is characterized by being very subjective and personal, as she is referring to both herself and her own shop throughout the entire essay. This also becomes evident as she uses personal pronouns such as I, me, and we. Furthermore, she also starts off the entire essay by saying, I opened my first fruit and veg shop in Spitalfields in 805. At least that's how it feels to me. This use of personal experience and personal pronouns creates kind of a sense of intimacy because the reader feels like they get to know Winterson through these personal anecdotes and experiences, and the reader also gets insight to her thoughts and feelings. As far as the argumentation goes in Winterson's essay, she mainly uses direct argumentation to argue for her viewpoints because she states her arguments explicitly and there are kind of like no underlying or hidden persuasion. This also makes it very easy for the reader to identify her main argument and attitude towards the themes of the essay. For example, her main argument is explicitly stated when she writes, quote, I worry that everything we do is about price. The things that give us pleasure can't be costed in a straightforward, balance sheet way. The bottom line isn't profit, it's being human. This quote really indicates that Winterson opposes the mentality of business people in today's society, where profit and mass production overrules our ethical and moral standards. Her main argument is therefore based on her belief that society is taking a wrong turn. She also believes that the modern politics of food neglects individuality and responsibility, which is also why she advocates for sustainability and treating our climate with respect. With her essay, Winterson is trying to convince the reader of the importance of thinking about the politics of food, as well as thinking about your own and others' well-being, which is also the animals. Rather than just money and materialistic things. In continuation of this, it's also very hard to miss the critique of capitalism and big corporations in this essay. And this is because Winterson is not afraid of telling her own opinion exactly as it is. For example, she says straightforwardly, quote, I don't like the chilly world of corporate retail. Not the food shops, not the bookstores, not the chain stores. I prefer individuality and eccentricity and self-determination. All the things the free market is supposed to deliver and never does, because markets soon become homogeneous and anti-competitive. And this quote really encapsulates the entire essence of this essay, which is Winterson opposing capitalism and big corporations because she believes that they only focus on profit and money and not the actual sustainability of what they're doing. However, one could also say that Winterson is being too subjective with these statements. one could argue that the viewpoints and the opinions stated in this essay are very biased and one-sided because of the author's own relation to the subject of matter. Because, of course, Winterson hates big supermarket chains and bigger corporations because she owns a tiny little shop herself and therefore most likely is losing customers to the bigger stores. As an owner of a tiny fruit and vegetable shop, this essay may be more of kind of a way for Winterson to justify the important role of her own shop to kind of counteract the frequent closings of small stores like her own and to ensure her own job in the future. On the other hand, however, the organic food stores and the small businesses are described with positive adjectives to kind of put them on a pedestal. This is, for example, seen when Winterson describes organic food with the following sentence when talking about the politics of food. And she says, quote, "The organic movement made it possible to easily buy humane meats." And the fact that she uses the adjective humane when talking about organic food kind of implies that she believes this is the only correct way to eat. And additionally, this sentence also kind of implies that everyone who doesn't buy organic food are the opposite of human, which would make them inhumane people. Imagery and a playful tone of voice throughout the entire text. For example, Winterson uses a simile when she compares the fruit exhibition outside of her shop to a work of art from Tate Modern, when she says the following, quote, "The pyramids of oranges, gassed lemons, King Kong-sized bananas, forests of parsley, potato towers, crates of peas, red tomatoes, pink grapefruit, deep stacked beetroot, all as creatively piled as anything in Tate Modern." And this simile between the fruit exhibition outside of her shop to a work of art from Tate Modern also shows that she has a great deal of humor and irony in this text, which is also a great quality. And when talking about the forms of appeal in this essay, one could say that her use of personal anecdotes gives her ethos because she's talking from her own experience throughout the entire text. She also uses a pathos appeal when saying, quote, "Good food need not to be expensive, but it cannot be so cheap that the land is degraded, the workers underpaid, and the animals reared and slaughtered in a way that would make any decent person sick." This is, as I said before, a great example of a pathos appeal because it evokes feelings of sympathy and rage within the reader. Additionally, it also creates kind of a concept of an enemy, or like this us and them feeling between the organic and the non-organic food. And again, Winterson is very aware of her word choice when she says that animals are slaughtered in a way that would make any decent person sick. She's kind of implying that if you think that it's okay for companies to treat innocent animals that way, or if you don't support sustainable farming, then you are and not a decent person. You are, by definition, inhumane and not decent. When talking about the use of history in this essay, it's only natural to mention the title Once Upon a Shop, which is quite similar to the classic saying Once Upon a Time, which was always used as the introductory paragraph of old fairy tales. However, one could argue that it's quite ironic that this title is a reference to a fairy tale when the picture that Winterson paints is of a greedy and profit-seeking world with no sense of responsibility whatsoever on behalf of our climate and our planet, which would be nothing like a magical fairy tale. However, on the other hand, one could also argue that this title actually is quite suitable if you look at how the shop itself is described from Winterson's point of view. And set aside from all the critique of capitalism and big businesses, Winterson does actually describe the surroundings of her own shop in a very magical manner, since she uses long and visually striking sentences to establish this kind of charming aura around the old and tiny vegetable shop. The title also underlines that the historical anchoring of this shop is the focus of the story, since there aren't many of these small shops left today. And in that way, you could also say that nostalgia plays a big role in Winterson's essay. However, something odd does catch the reader's eyes when Winters in the beginning of the essay uses history as an element of comparison when she's talking about the age of the shop. For example, she talks about the Napoleonic Wars when she says, quote, "While Nelson was gunning the French, we were selling onions the size of cannonballs." However, the Napoleonic Wars and also the Battle of Trafalgar both happened in the early 1800s. But oddly enough, Winterson wasn't even born until 1959, which means that she couldn't possibly have been alive, and yet alone owning her own shop during the Napoleonic Wars, even though that she states otherwise. And in that sense, maybe the use of history and the comparisons to old wars from the 1800s is a way for Winterson to refer to a feeling rather than actual historical events. She does actually also give a hint to this in the very beginning of the text as well, when she says, quote, "I opened my first fruit and veg shop in Spitalfields in 1805. At least that is how it feels." And the last part of that sentence implies that Winterson is well aware that the shop didn't exist in 1805. However, that it feels like she has had the shop forever. And in that way, the use of history should maybe more be seen as a metaphorical statement, because she says that her shop is old and it feels like she's had it in centuries. However, one could also argue that this misleading information about the age of the shop and its existence during the Napoleonic Wars makes the author appear kind of less trustworthy and more unreliable. Because even though Winterson does actually hint this, that she's being sarcastic in the beginning, the reader can't help but feel kind of deceived. Lastly, I would like to draw a parallel from Janet Winterson's text to our work with the theme man and nature in class. Because just as we worked with man's relationship with nature, Winterson deals with the exact same issue in this essay. Winterson believes that nature went from being untouched by man, or at least man living in harmony with nature, to then man beginning to manipulate and destroy its basis for living. And the intention with her essay is therefore to better man's understanding of nature, as well as making people realize that we have to take good care of our planet by buying sustainable and organic food and embracing all the small shops if we want to better our current situation. All things considered, one could conclude that Janet Winterson's essay, Once Upon a Shop, is a powerful essay with an important message of taking care of our planet by shopping sustainable and ethical. Winterson calls out mass-producing corporations for solely focusing on profit by using value-laden words and negative connotations. Her personal experience with her own shop gives her a unique and understandable standpoint. However, the argumentation could be very one-sided, as Winterson isn't very nuanced or balanced in her argumentation. Furthermore, it's safe to say that her judgment is in danger of being clouded by her own personal relation to the discussion of small shops and big supermarket chains, as she will always speak for her and her own shop's survival.